Mira Harlow stood in front of the tall glass building of Harlow Industries like she was staring at a giant she wasn't sure she could defeat. The sun glinted off the windows, throwing streaks of light across the pavement, and the cold wind brushed against her cheeks, almost as if the city itself was trying to comfort her. But her heart didn't slow down. If anything, it beat harder. It was strange to think that a building she'd visited countless times as a kid suddenly felt so intimidating. She remembered running down the halls when she was 7, begging her father to let her sit in his office chair. She remembered birthdays he celebrated with the employees, the way he made everyone laugh, the way he'd always tell her, "This company is not just walls and desks, people. Mira, people who trust us." That memory stung now because the man who said those words was gone. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to breathe past the ache. She'd been in San Diego finishing her master's degree in business strategy. She'd been happy there, stressed, exhausted, always hungry, but happy. Every night, she sent her father updates. Every morning, he texted encouragements, sometimes with emojis that didn't match what he was trying to say. And then the call came. The call she still replayed in her head like a movie scene she didn't want to watch, but couldn't escape. She remembered the sound of her professor's voice telling her to step outside, the way her fingers shook as she answered her phone, the world spinning as someone said words she couldn't fully hear. Heart attack and no warning. He didn't make it. That was all she remembered before dropping to her knees in the hallway. The weeks that followed were a blur of tears, arrangements, signatures, condolences, and nights staring at the ceiling, wondering how a world could keep moving when her father wasn't in it anymore. Then the will arrived. She wasn't prepared for that. She sat in the lawyer's office, listening to words that felt too heavy to fit inside her ears. "You are the sole heir, the next CEO. Your father trusted you. He believed in your vision." She didn't remember half of what was said. All she knew was that people were suddenly looking at her with expectations she didn't feel strong enough to carry. She wanted to run. She wanted her dad back. She wanted time, just a little more time to grow into the person he believed she already was. But the world didn't wait. The company didn't wait. The employees didn't wait. Everyone wanted to meet the American daughter. Everyone wanted to see who was taking the throne of Harlow Industries. And Mira didn't want their eyes on her. Not yet. Not when her heart was this bruised. Not when grief still wrapped around her like a heavy coat she couldn't take off. So she did something she didn't tell anyone. Not her lawyer, not her friends, not even herself fully until it was done. She disguised herself, not in some dramatic movie way with wigs and elaborate makeup, just enough that no one would look at her twice. An oversized janitor uniform, thick glasses, a baseball cap pulled low, hair tied tightly and tucked away, no makeup, shoes that had seen better days, just enough to make her invisible because she needed to know the truth. She needed to know if her father's employees still believed in honesty, kindness, and loyalty, the values he held like oxygen. She needed to see what kind of world she was inheriting, who applauded her father in public but secretly mocked him in corners, who cared about the company's future, and who only cared about themselves. Walking as a CEO would get her fake smiles. Walking as a janitor would get her reality. So there she was, standing at the entrance, breathing slowly, telling herself she could do this. She had to. Her fingers tightened around the mop handle. She carried her shield, her disguise, her test. When she finally pushed open the glass doors, the air conditioning brushed cool air over her skin. But it didn't calm the storm swirling inside her. The lobby looked exactly the same. Polished floors, towering plants, a huge company logo stretching across the wall. But she felt different, invisible, and somehow more exposed than ever. She took her first step inside. Instantly, whispers began. Why do we even hire cleaners like this? She's blocking the hallway. Look at her clothes. I hope she doesn't sweat on the floor. Each word landed like tiny shards of glass, poking at her heart. She kept her head down, staring at the reflection of the ceiling lights on the floor as she walked. If she looked up, she was scared her eyes would reveal too much. The pain, the frustration, the anger crawling under her skin. Being insulted by strangers was one thing, but being insulted inside the very company her father poured his soul into, that was a new kind of hurt. Her father always said the company was like a family, but families didn't talk like this. Families didn't treat people like they were disposable. She pushed her cleaning cart along the hall, forcing her breath to stay steady. She couldn't react. She couldn't reveal herself. Not yet. She needed to learn. She needed to watch. She needed to see who cared and who didn't. As she passed by the reception desk, the receptionist, a young woman with perfect hair and the kind of smile people practiced in mirrors, looked her up and down like Mira had dragged dirt into her perfect world. "You're blocking the desk," the woman said sharply. "Move to the side." Mira swallowed. "Sorry," she whispered. The woman rolled her eyes. Mira kept moving. Inside the elevator, 2 employees squeezed in beside her and immediately wrinkled their noses like she carried something contagious. One man nudged his friend and whispered loudly enough for her to hear. "Looks like they picked her up off the street." Mira stared at the floor, blinking fast, fighting the tears building behind her eyes. She didn't cry easily. Her father used to tease her about how tough she was. "My little hurricane," he'd say, "always strong, always fierce." But grief had softened her edges, made her more fragile than she wanted to admit. Still, she stayed quiet. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped out and let the cart roll forward. The hall was busy with employees moving in every direction, laughing, talking, typing on tablets, sipping coffee. No one looked at her, and when they did, she wished they hadn't. She reached the supply closet and sank onto a small stool inside, shutting the door behind her. The tiny room smelled like lemon cleaner and detergent, but it felt safe, the only place where she wasn't being judged. She let herself breathe, really breathe. Her hands trembled around the mop handle. "What am I doing?" she whispered to herself, but the answer came easily. Finding the truth, finding the heart of this company, the heart her father believed in. Maybe she was scared, maybe she was completely out of her depth. Maybe she was pretending to be brave when she felt anything, but she wasn't running. Not today. She stood up again, smoothed out her uniform, wiped her eyes quickly, and pulled the cart back into the hallway. People could whisper. People could judge. People could underestimate her, but they didn't know who she was. They didn't know the fire in her chest. They didn't know she carried her father's name, not as a crown, but as a promise. A promise to protect what he built. A promise to lead with integrity. A promise to do what was right, even when it hurt. As she walked through the hallway again, her heart still ached, but her steps grew steadier, stronger. They saw a janitor, but she knew who she truly was. Mira Harlow, daughter of a legacy and future CEO of the company she was about to inspect from the ground up. Her story had only just begun. Mira learned quickly what it felt like to be invisible in a place where she once felt completely at home. People brushed past her like she wasn't there. They let doors swing shut in her face. They spoke around her, over her, and occasionally about her, as if she couldn't hear them. Sometimes she wondered if she had made a mistake, if pretending to be someone she wasn't was too much, too risky, too painful. But every time doubt crept in, she remembered her father's words about trust and loyalty, and she knew she had to stay. Still, pretending to be a janitor in her father's company was harder than she expected. Her back hurt from hours of sweeping. Her palms were sore from scrubbing. Her heart felt heavy from the constant whispers that pricked at her spirit like needles. She kept her head down, kept her voice soft, kept her steps light, until the morning she met Bryce. It started with an elevator. Mira had just finished cleaning the 6th-floor hallway and was pushing her cart toward the elevator doors. Her uniform felt a bit too hot, and her hair kept slipping out from under her cap, brushing against her neck. She tried to tuck it back in as she pushed the down button. The elevator dinged open, and she quickly tried to pull her cart inside, but the wheels caught on the edge, and the cart jerked sideways, nearly tipping over. Before she could react, someone stepped forward and grabbed the other side of the cart to steady it. "Whoa, careful," a warm voice said. "You okay?" Mira blinked, startled. The person holding the cart was a man, tall, soft-eyed, dressed in a crisp shirt and tie, but not in the way people wore clothes to show off. His shirt sleeves were slightly rolled. His tie was a little crooked, and his hair looked like he ran his fingers through it too often, trying to fix it, but only making it messier. "Oh, swear." He smiled at her. An actual smile, not a forced one, not a polite one. A real kind smile that reached his eyes. "Thanks," Mira managed, her voice smaller than she intended. "Don't mention it." He held the elevator door open with his elbow. "Do you want to go down?" She nodded, and he maneuvered the cart inside for her. When they were both in the elevator, he pressed the button for the lobby. Most people would have stared at their phones or looked at the ceiling, pretending she wasn't there. But not him. "I see you around a lot," he said. "You work pretty hard." Mira blinked in surprise. No one had ever said that to her since she started this undercover mission. She usually only heard complaints, never appreciation. "Oh," she whispered, not sure what else to say. "Thank you," He laughed softly. Sorry, I probably sound weird. I just noticed. You're always moving fast and you're always alone. Mira looked down at her shoes. It's part of the job. Well, you're doing great, he said, and somehow the compliment felt genuine, not pitying. When the elevator reached the lobby, he stepped out first and held the door for her. Again, no one did that for her. When she pushed the cart out, he gave her one more smile before walking toward the glass doors. For the rest of the day, Mira kept replaying the encounter in her head. His voice, his kindness, his smile. It felt like a tiny beam of sunlight in a place that had felt cold and unfamiliar, and she didn't even know his name. She met him again. She was cleaning one of the break rooms, wiping down a counter covered in coffee spills that no one bothered to clean when he walked in. "Oh, it's you," he said with a smile, as if finding her there made his morning better. Mira froze mid-wipe, her heart jumping. "Hi." He walked to the coffee machine but paused, turning toward her. "Do you mind if I sit for a minute? I've been in meetings since sunrise." She stepped aside quickly. "You can sit anywhere." He sat at a table near the window and sipped his coffee, watching her work in a calm, thoughtful way. Not judging, not staring, just noticing. "What's your name?" he asked after a moment. Mira's breath hitched. She had to remember who she was supposed to be. "Lena," she said softly, the name she used for her disguise. "Lena," he repeated, nodding. "Nice to officially meet you. I'm Bryce." Bryce. Finally, a name. She whispered it in her head, letting it settle there like a small secret. "That's a nice name," she said. He chuckled. "Thanks. I didn't pick it, though." Mira laughed before she could stop herself. Bryce smiled at the sound and her cheeks warmed. After a moment, he leaned forward a little. "So, is this your first job here?" She nodded. "Yes." "Do you like it?" She hesitated. Not really, but she couldn't say that. "It's okay," she said carefully. "It's different, but I'm learning." Bryce tilted his head as if he heard something deeper in her words, but he didn't push. "Well, I hope people here treat you well," he said gently. "If anyone gives you trouble, just tell me. I'll throw a stapler at them." Mira's eyes widened, and he burst into laughter. "Not literally," he said quickly, raising his hands. "I mean, I'll talk to them or glare at them. My glaring face is pretty strong." His silliness made her laugh again. A real laugh that made her ribs loosen. This was new, unexpected, warm. A tiny corner of her heart softened. Over the following period, Bryce kept showing up in her life in small, thoughtful ways. When he saw her pushing heavy trash bags, he would help without being asked. When she sat alone during lunch, he would sit across from her with his sandwich and start talking about the random things he found interesting. Planets, weird documentaries, childhood memories. When she dropped her mop one afternoon because her hands were tired, he picked it up and said, "I think your mop hates you." Her days didn't feel as lonely anymore. She found herself looking forward to break times, to quiet hallways, to moments when she might hear his voice. Every time he smiled at her, something inside her fluttered, something she wasn't supposed to feel. Not here, not now, not while she was wearing a disguise that hid her real life. But feelings didn't wait for perfect timing. When she finished her shift and stepped outside, she found Bryce waiting near the steps. "You're off?" he asked. "Yes." "Want to get ice cream? There's a small place 2 blocks away." Mira froze. She shouldn't. She really shouldn't. The smart thing would be to stay distant, to keep her heart safe, to protect her secret. But she had been lonely for so long, and Bryce's kindness felt like a life raft in a sea she didn't know how to swim through. So she nodded. "Okay." His face lit up. They walked together talking about everything and nothing. Her favorite books, his favorite movies, the time he accidentally dyed his hair green in high school, the time she slipped in the snow in front of an entire marching band. She laughed until her cheeks hurt. When they reached the river that night, the moon stretched across the water like a silver path and the air felt soft and quiet. Bryce stood beside her, his hands tucked in his pockets. Mira held her ice cream cup, trying not to let her fingers shake. "You know," he said softly, "you're different from most people here." Mira looked up at him. "Different how?" "Real," he said. "Comfortable, kind. You don't try to impress anyone. You're just you." Her throat tightened. If only he knew. When she didn't speak, he turned toward her. His eyes were gentle, searching. "Can I tell you something?" She nodded. "I'm really glad I met you," he said quietly. Mira's heart swelled and ached at the same time. She had never expected anyone to notice her while she wore a disguise meant to erase her. Yet Bryce saw her. Really saw her. Slowly, carefully, he reached out and took her hand. She didn't pull away. The world around them felt like it faded into soft colors and quiet sounds. And then, under the glow of the moon, he leaned in and kissed her. It was gentle, warm, sweet, the kind of kiss that felt like a beginning. And in that moment, Mira forgot about her disguise, her fear, her secrets, and the weight she carried. She only felt him. But when the kiss ended, reality rushed back like cold wind. She smiled softly, trying to hide the ache of guilt inside her chest. Because Bryce was falling for Lena, the quiet janitor, not Mira Harlow, the future CEO of the whole building he worked in, and she had no idea how to tell him the truth. Mira woke up the next morning with a strange mixture of happiness and dread twisting inside her chest. Happiness because the memory of Bryce's kiss lingered like soft light in her heart. Dread because she knew she was living two lives that could not stay separate forever. She stared at herself in the mirror of her tiny rented apartment, dressed in her oversized janitor uniform, glasses that kept sliding down her nose, hair tucked away beneath her cap. She hardly recognized the girl staring back at her. A girl who swept floors, a girl who pretended she didn't know half the things she overheard in meetings. A girl who spent her days hiding and her nights missing her father so deeply it sometimes made her breath catch. But behind that disguise lived the real Mira, the woman who was supposed to lead Harlow Industries, fix its wounds, and protect her father's legacy. She carried both identities like heavy bags she couldn't drop. And today, the weight felt heavier than ever. When she arrived at the office, the atmosphere felt off. More tense, more rushed, more cold. People were whispering faster than usual, flipping through documents, typing with tight jaws and downcast eyes. Something was happening. Something big. Something wrong. She pushed her cart quietly down the hallway, pretending she wasn't listening, but her ears picked up everything. They're missing funds again. How is that possible? It's the third quarter in a row. Someone is covering it up. Mira felt her stomach clench. Missing funds. Again, she had heard whispers before, but she assumed they were small errors or miscalculations. Now, she wasn't so sure. She kept her pace steady and approached the accounting office, one of the places she cleaned most often. The door was half open and she heard voices inside. "I don't understand," one employee whispered. "The numbers don't add up. They haven't added up for months," another replied nervously. But the manager said he'd handle it. The manager, Mr. Whitaker, Mira had always felt something off about him. Even before she saw suspicious numbers in the system, even before he glared at her as if her presence alone offended him, he walked like someone who thought he owned the entire building. He talked to the staff like everyone was beneath him, and he treated janitors like bugs he wished he could step on. She pushed her cart inside the office quietly. The employees didn't even look at her, which for once was helpful. As she swept the floor, she glanced at the papers spread across the desk. Columns of numbers, highlighted sections, red circles around totals that didn't align. Her heart thudded. This wasn't a small mistake. This was deliberate and huge. She kept sweeping, pretending not to notice as the employees muttered behind her, "What if we're audited? We're doomed if that happens. Do you think it's—" Before they could finish, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Strong, sharp, confident. The employees straightened immediately. The manager walked in. "Mr. Whitaker?" His eyes scanned the room, landing on Mira like she was dirt smudged across a window. "You're still here," he said sharply. "This floor should have been cleaned an hour ago." I'm almost done," Mira whispered. He didn't even try to hide his disgust. "Try harder." She lowered her head as he walked past her. But inside, something burned. Anger, frustration, resolve. He treated everyone poorly. But the files she'd been quietly gathering pieces from suggested he treated the company even worse. As he stormed into his office and shut the door loudly, she glanced back at the employees. They all looked frightened. Why? What were they afraid of? What had Whitaker done? She finished sweeping and moved her cart down the hallway, trying to steady her breathing. She needed to know more. She had to. Later, during her lunch break, Mira made her way to the rooftop, her quiet place. The wind always felt gentler up there, and the view of the city made her heart ache in a way she couldn't fully explain. It reminded her of her father standing beside her years ago, pointing at the skyline and saying, "One day, you'll make this place better than I ever did." She wrapped her arms around herself as she looked out at the buildings stretching endlessly across the horizon. She missed him. She missed his calm voice and warm hands, and the way he always made complicated things feel simple. She didn't hear footsteps until someone sat beside her. Mira. Her breath caught. She hadn't even heard the door open. He always had a way of sneaking into moments she didn't realize she needed company. "You okay?" he asked softly. She forced a small smile. "Yeah, just thinking. Thinking hard," he said, nudging her shoulder lightly. "Your forehead is doing that little wrinkle thing." She laughed weakly. "Is that so?" "Definitely." He leaned back, resting his hands behind him. "Want to talk about it?" She did. More than anything she did, she wanted to tell him everything. Her secrets, her fears, her doubts, her investigations, her grief. She wanted to tell him who she really was, but she couldn't. Not yet. "Just work stuff," she whispered. "You can always talk to me," he said gently, "even if it's about mops. I'm a great listener." Mira smiled, but her heart tightened. He didn't know the storm building inside her. He didn't know she was uncovering something dangerous. He didn't know that just being near him made her lies feel heavier, but he sat there anyway, offering comfort she didn't deserve, yet desperately needed. They talked for a few minutes about nothing important. How cold the rooftop breeze was, how he accidentally microwaved metal last night, how she hated elevators that made weird sounds. It distracted her long enough to breathe normally again. When she got up to leave, he gently touched her arm. "Hey," he said softly. "Whatever's bothering you, I hope you know you're not alone." She swallowed hard. "Thank you." And she meant it. That evening, Mira stayed late to finish cleaning the accounting department. Most of the staff had gone home and the hallways were dim and quiet. She preferred it that way. Fewer eyes, fewer whispers, fewer chances to reveal something she shouldn't. She paused outside the manager's office and listened. Silence. Good. She slipped inside the accounting room and walked straight to the filing cabinet she'd noticed earlier. Her hands shook as she opened the drawers, scanning through folders and documents. The numbers didn't lie. Funds were missing large amounts across multiple months, and every suspicious transfer led back to the manager's approval. But as she flipped through a set of statements, something caught her eye. A stamped signature, her father's. Her breath hitched. Her father would never approve these transactions. Never. He had always been strict about finances. He believed in transparency more than anything. The signature wasn't his. Someone forged it. Her blood ran cold. She took photos of everything with her phone, her fingers trembling with adrenaline and fear. She didn't know how deep this went, but she was sure of one thing. Whitaker wasn't just stealing money. He was bearing something bigger, something dangerous, something that could destroy everything her father built. She quietly returned the files and slipped out of the room, her heart pounding so hard it felt like a drum inside her chest. She needed more proof. She needed to be careful, and she needed to stay hidden, because if Whitaker ever found out who she really was, he wouldn't let her walk out of this building alive. As she pushed her cart down the empty hallway, a chill crawled down her spine. She wasn't just playing a role anymore. She wasn't just observing. She was in the middle of a storm no one else even knew existed. And the shadows in Harlow Industries were darker than she imagined. Mira felt like she had developed a sixth sense, a silent alarm that hummed in the back of her mind every time she entered the building. Something was shifting, something dangerous, something she needed to uncover before it swallowed her father's legacy whole. She kept her head lowered as she walked through the lobby, pushing her cart toward the elevator. Her uniform felt heavier today. The weight of the secrets she carried seemed stitched into the fabric. Every step echoed with anxiety. She pressed the elevator button and waited. Employees passed by her, laughing, chatting, tapping away on their phones. Their world kept spinning as if everything was perfectly normal. But behind the shiny glass walls, chaos was brewing, and the person controlling it was sitting on the top floor in a perfectly ironed suit. Inside his office, Manager Whitaker leaned back in his chair with a smug expression. He sipped lukewarm coffee from a fancy ceramic mug paid for with company money. Stolen money? Mira now knew. He flipped through documents that should have been delivered weeks ago and tossed aside any that irritated him. His desk was a battlefield of abandoned papers, empty folders, and half-finished reports he never planned to complete. Then his computer pinged. A new email. He squinted at the sender. Harlow Legal Division. His heartbeat quickened. The lawyers never contacted him directly unless something major was happening. He clicked the email, and a short memo appeared on the screen. Good morning. This is to formally notify you that Miss Mira Harlow has arrived in the country and will be visiting the office within the next few days as per her late father's will and succession arrangements. Kindly prepare any necessary documents and ensure readiness for her arrival. Whitaker froze. Mira Harlow. He read it again slowly, eyes narrowing. The American daughter, the only heir, the girl raised overseas, the one who would take everything from him. His throat tightened. Attached to the memo were photos of her, official photos meant for the press and internal records. Professional headshot, soft smiles, confident posture. She looked smart, collected, almost intimidating in her own quiet way. He stared longer than he should have. Something about her face tugged at his memory. Where have I seen her? He leaned closer to his screen and zoomed into one photo. The slightly tilted chin, the shape of her eyes, the delicate mouth, the softness around her cheeks clicked. His entire body went still. That janitor, he whispered, the quiet girl who swept floors, the one he insulted almost daily, the one he threatened to fire more times than he could count, the one who kept her head down but always seemed to be listening, the one whose face, now that he stared longer, looked exactly like Mira Harlow without makeup, without fancy clothes, without confidence. A cold wave rolled through him. It was her. It had to be her. He pushed away from his desk so quickly his chair rolled back and hit the wall. He paced the room, breathing hard. No, she wouldn't do that. She wouldn't dare. But his instincts told him she already had. She must have discovered something. She had to have figured out pieces of his scheme. She had been in the office late. She had always hovered near accounting. She had gotten too close. His lies, his forged signatures, his hidden transactions, his hidden accounts. She had seen too much, and if she really was Mira Harlow, she had the power to destroy him completely. His hands clenched into fists. Everything he had done, all the money he siphoned, all the shortcuts he took, everything was at risk. All because of her. Meanwhile, Mira was finishing up cleaning the conference room. Unaware that her entire world was about to explode, she wiped the table slowly, replaying the numbers she'd memorized the night before. The forged signatures, the missing funds, the pattern of theft, the fear in the employees' voices. Her father would have hated this. He believed in honor, in fairness, in truth. She felt like she owed it to him to fix this mess with her own hands. She was so deep in thought that she didn't notice the familiar soft footsteps approaching the doorway until Bryce spoke. "Hey," he said gently. "Did you eat yet?" Mira jumped, almost dropping her cloth. Bryce laughed softly and leaned against the doorframe. "You're so jumpy today," he teased lightly. "Is everything okay?" "Just tired," Mira murmured. He frowned a little, scanning her face. "Are you sure?" She nodded. Lying to him was getting harder. Bryce stepped closer, his voice warm. "If you ever need someone to listen or to distract you with terrible jokes, I'm here." Her breath caught. She forced a small smile. "I know." His cheeks turned slightly pink at her tone. "Good." He was about to say more when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and winced. "I have to take this. Meet later?" "Sure." He gave her one last gentle smile and walked away. Mira watched him disappear down the hallway, wishing she could freeze that moment. Wishing she didn't have to keep hurting him with silence. But she had work to do. Dangerous work. She straightened her uniform, braced herself, and dragged her cleaning cart toward the next floor. That evening, the office emptied gradually, lights turning off one by one. Mira stayed behind, as she often did. It was safer to investigate when no one else was around. She didn't know that Whitaker stayed behind too, fueled by panic, paranoia, and growing rage. From his darkened office, he watched the cameras. He saw her, the janitor he now knew was Mira, walking alone through the building, his eyes filled with venom. "She came here to take everything," he muttered. "To expose me? To ruin me." He slammed his fist on his desk. Not if he ruined her first. His plan formed quickly, dark and desperate. He waited until the last employee left. Waited until the hallways fell silent. Waited until Mira rolled her cart past his office door. Then he stepped out. Mira was wiping her hands on her uniform when she heard a voice behind her. "Can you come here for a moment?" She turned. Whitaker. Her stomach tightened. Something about his tone felt wrong. Too calm, too controlled, too rehearsed. Is something wrong?" she asked carefully. "No," he said with a forced smile. "I just need help with something in my office." Every instinct in her body screamed at her to run. But before she could reply, he stepped aside, gesturing her in. Her heart thumped painfully. but she forced her feet to move. This was her father's building. She wasn't afraid, or so she told herself. She walked into the office. The door shut behind her with a soft click. Then everything happened fast. Whitaker lunged. Mira gasped as he grabbed her arms and shoved her to the ground. Pain shot through her shoulders as he pinned her there. She struggled, but he was stronger. "So, you're Mira Harlow," he hissed. Her blood ran cold. Her secret was gone. Completely gone. "You think you can ruin me?" he snarled, tying her wrists with the thick cord he'd already prepared. "You think you can take my life away because of that stupid name you inherited?" Mira struggled, tears burning her eyes. "You stole from my father. You betrayed him." He tightened the knot sharply. "He was weak, and you're weaker." She kicked, screamed, fought, but no one heard. The building was empty. The halls were silent. He dragged her out the back door, not noticing the small device that slipped from her pocket. Her phone, the last lifeline she didn't even realize she dropped. He shoved her into a van and sped into the night, toward the outskirts of the city where no one would hear her cries. And Mira, bound and terrified, realized something chilling. This was no longer an investigation. It was survival. The ropes cut into Mira's wrists as the van jolted along the empty highway. Every bump sent a new bolt of pain through her arms. Her breath came in quick, shaky bursts as she lay curled on the cold metal floor. She tried to move her fingers, hoping to loosen the cords, but they were tied too tight. Her heart pounded so loudly she wondered if Whitaker could hear it. The windows were blacked out. The air smelled like gasoline and dust. The only light came from the faint glow of the dashboard at the front of the van, casting long shadows across the walls. Mira squeezed her eyes shut, trying to stay calm, but fear crawled up her throat like a scream she couldn't release. She had been naive. She thought she could walk into the shadows of Harlow Industries and uncover the truth quietly. She thought she could handle danger the same way she handled grief, by swallowing it down and pretending she was fine. But danger had a face now, a voice, a temper, a pair of hands that had thrown her to the ground without hesitation. Her body trembled at the memory of Whitaker's cold whisper. "So you're Mira Harlow. You think you can take everything from me?" She had never imagined that her father's company, the place built on kindness and integrity, could hold someone capable of this. Behind her, the van door rattled as they sped over a pothole. Mira's shoulder slammed into the metal wall. She winced, tears stinging her eyes. "Stop struggling," Whitaker barked from the driver's seat. She froze. His voice was full of venom, as if the very sound of her breathing offended him. "You think you're better than everyone?" he muttered, gripping the steering wheel. "You think you're some kind of hero, checking files, sneaking around, playing detective." Mira swallowed hard. "You stole money, you forged documents, you destroyed my father's work." He slammed his fist on the dashboard, making her flinch. "Your father was a fool," he snapped. "He trusted people too easily. He trusted me too easily." Mira's chest tightened. "He trusted you like family." "Exactly," Whitaker spat. "And what did he give me at the end? Nothing. Not a single chance. Not a single piece of recognition. He built a kingdom and handed it to a girl who lived thousands of miles away." Mira's voice shook. "I never asked for the company." "But you got it anyway," he hissed. "And I'm not losing everything because you suddenly decided to play boss." Mira's stomach twisted with fear as she watched the blurred trees rush past through the tiny crack in the window covering. They were moving farther and farther away from the city, from safety, from help. "What are you gonna do to me?" she whispered. Whitaker let out a humorless laugh. "Don't worry, I'm not stupid enough to murder the new CEO. I just need you out of the picture long enough to clean up the mess you created." "You mean the mess you created?" He ignored her. "We're almost there," he muttered. "Almost where?" Mira's breath hitched. The van slowed, tires crunching against gravel. Whitaker parked beside a stretch of dark, empty woods. He stepped out and opened the back door. The cold night air rushed in, biting her skin. Stars blinked faintly above the treetops, distant, unreachable. "Get up," he ordered. Mira tried to sit up on her own, but her legs wobbled. Whitaker grabbed her by the arm and yanked her out of the van. Her knees hit the dirt hard. "Walk," he snapped. I can't," she gasped. Her legs were too weak, too numb. He tightened his grip and dragged her deeper into the woods, branches snapping under their feet. Mira stumbled, nearly falling twice, but he didn't slow down. Finally, he shoved her into the center of a small clearing and tied her to a thick tree trunk. He worked fast, as if he'd rehearsed this in his head. "Someone will find you tomorrow," he said. "Hopefully." Mira's heart hammered painfully. She stared at him through tears, unable to understand how a human could treat another person so carelessly. "You won't get away with this," she whispered. He smirked. "I already have." And then he walked away, leaving her in the cold darkness, tied to a tree, listening to the van door slam shut and the engine fade into the night. For the first time in weeks, Mira felt truly helpless, completely alone. Her tears fell silently as she leaned her head back against the bark. The forest around her rustled with strange sounds, the distant hoot of an owl, the soft movement of leaves, the whisper of wind against the branches. She tried not to panic, but the silence was suffocating. Her breath came in shallow, uneven gasps as she whispered a thought she hated admitting. "I'm scared, Dad. I'm really scared." She didn't know how long she sat there. She shivered, exhausted, her body aching from being tied so tightly. But she didn't know one important thing. Someone was searching for her. Bryce waited outside the building, leaning against a column near the entrance. He checked his watch again. Mira should have finished her shift by now. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the strange sense of unease growing in his chest. She always walked out at the same time. She always spotted him and gave him that tired but sweet smile. But tonight, she was nowhere. He walked inside, telling himself she was probably cleaning something extra. But when he entered the hallway, the sight made his blood run cold. Her cleaning cart was tipped over. A mop lay abandoned on the floor. A trash bag had spilled its contents. Her hat was lying a few feet away, crushed. Bryce froze, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. Something happened. His hand shook as he pulled out his phone and dialed her number. He held it to his ear. Ring, ring, ring. Then it went straight to voicemail. Bryce's stomach sank. He didn't hesitate. He called the police immediately. "My friend is missing," he said breathlessly. "There are signs of a struggle. I think she's in danger." The officers arrived quickly, lights flashing outside the building. They listened to his frantic explanation, then moved through the hall, inspecting the overturned cart and scattered items. One officer knelt and picked something up. "Her phone," he said. Bryce closed his eyes in relief. "Can you track it?" "We'll try." Within minutes, they pinged the device. A location popped up miles away near a patch of woods outside the city. Bryce felt something sharp twist in his chest. "Please," he begged, "take me with you." The officer nodded. They rushed to the patrol car, sirens already blaring. Mira's breaths were slower now, not because she was calmer, but because she was tired, so tired she could barely keep her eyes open. Her hands were numb, her throat was dry, her cheek was pressed against the cold tree trunk. She tried to stay awake. She really did. But her eyelids drooped and the darkness crept closer. Then a crack. Footsteps. Mira's eyes flew open. Panic shot through her. "Please no," she whispered. Branches snapped in the distance. "Mira!" a voice shouted. Her heart stopped. That voice she would recognize anywhere. "Mira, where are you?" Tears blurred her vision as she tried to call out, but her voice was too weak. "Over here!" one of the officers yelled after spotting movement through his flashlight. Bryce sprinted toward the sound. He pushed aside branches, stumbled over roots, scraped his hands on the rough bark, but he didn't stop until he saw her, tied to the tree, shivering, eyes wide and frightened. His Mira. "Oh, God," Bryce whispered, falling to his knees beside her. "Mira, I'm here. I'm here." He fumbled to untie the ropes, his hands trembling so badly an officer had to help him. The moment her wrists were free, Mira collapsed into his arms, sobbing softly. Bryce held her against his chest, his voice breaking. "It's okay. You're safe. I've got you." She clung to him weakly, unable to speak. The warmth of his embrace felt like sunlight after a long, frozen night. She didn't care about the dirt, the tears, the fear. She only cared that he came, that he found her, that he didn't stop until she was safe. Bryce buried his face in her hair, whispering again and again, "I'm here. I'm here. I'm here." It was the safest she had felt since her father died. The morning after Mira's rescue felt surreal, like waking up after a nightmare, only to realize the nightmare wasn't over. It had simply shifted shape. She sat in a warm hospital room with soft sheets pulled up to her waist, her wrists wrapped in bandages, and her voice still faint from exhaustion. Outside, pale sunlight pressed gently against the window, but inside her chest, everything felt loud. Every breath, every heartbeat, every memory of last night. Bryce had slept in a chair beside her bed, his head resting against his folded arms. His hair was messy, his shoulders tense even in sleep. He hadn't left her side once. Mira watched him for a moment, her heart aching. She wanted to reach out and touch his hair, to thank him, to tell him everything she'd hidden for weeks, but words stuck in her throat because the truth she owed him was a truth that would shake him. A nurse entered quietly and smiled when she saw Mira awake. After a brief checkup and a reminder to rest, she gently placed a neatly folded set of clothes on the armchair. A tailored black suit, white blouse, simple heels, a small pin with the Harlow crest. The clothes her father had prepared for her months ago, the clothes meant for her first official day as CEO. Mira stared at them with a mix of fear and determination. It was time. No more hiding and no more scrubbing floors and no more fear. Today, she wasn't walking into Harlow Industries as Lena the janitor. Today, she was walking in as Mira Harlow, leader, survivor. She stepped out of the hospital with the police escort waiting for her. Bryce walked beside her quiet, confused, still processing the whirlwind of the night before. He glanced at her outfit, then at the police, then at her again. "Are you going somewhere?" he asked softly. Mira swallowed, nerves tightening in her stomach. "Yes, to the building," she nodded. He looked puzzled. "But why? Shouldn't you rest? You were just—" "I can't rest until this is done," she said, her voice steady. Bryce's eyes softened with concern, but he didn't push. "Okay, I'm with you." Mira inhaled sharply. "Bryce, before you come with me, there's something I should—" He stopped and faced her fully. "Mira, whatever it is, tell me after. Let me be with you today. Please." Something inside her melted at the sincerity in his voice. She nodded slowly. They got into the cruiser, and the moment the car pulled out onto the road, Mira's heart started racing again, not with fear this time, but with the weight of what she was about to do. The morning rush was in full swing. Employees walked through the lobby holding coffee cups, chatting in small groups, greeting each other with sleepy smiles, and then the elevator dinged. People turned towards the sound casually, then froze. Mira stepped out, flanked by two officers. Silence dropped over the lobby like a heavy curtain. A ripple of confusion spread through the room. Wait, is that the janitor? No, that can't be. She looks different. Bryce stepped out behind her, but no one registered him yet. Every pair of eyes was locked on Mira, the woman who used to sweep their floors and empty their trash bins, the woman who now walked like she belonged on the top floor, like she belonged everywhere. Mira's heels clicked softly against the marble as she made her way toward the staircase. Employees parted automatically, whispering, staring, craning their necks to get a better view. She reached the balcony that overlooked the lobby, the same place her father once stood to give speeches. Mira swallowed the lump rising in her throat. Then she stepped forward. "Good morning," she said, her voice carrying through the open space. The room went silent again. "My name is Mira Harlow." Gasps filled the lobby. People turned to each other in disbelief. Someone whispered, "But she was the janitor." Mira continued. "For the past weeks, I have been working here undercover. I came as someone no one notices, someone people walk past without a second glance. I did this because I wanted to see the true heart of this company, the company my father built." Her fingers tightened on the railing. "And what I saw broke my heart." The lobby was so quiet she could hear her own breathing. "I saw cruelty. I saw dishonesty. I saw people who were willing to destroy the foundation my father worked so hard to build. But I also saw kindness. I saw hard work. I saw people who still believe in honesty." Her eyes scanned the crowd until they landed on Bryce. Standing near the stairs, staring at her with shock, admiration, and something deeper, Mira's voice softened. "Some of you showed me more humanity than I expected." Then her expression hardened. "But some of you betrayed this company." She turned her gaze to the top of the staircase. A door opened, and Manager Whitaker stepped out pale and trembling, surrounded by policemen waiting for Mira's signal. His eyes widened when he saw her standing proudly on the balcony. How are you alive?" he whispered, horrified. Mira looked at him with a calmness she didn't feel earlier. "You failed." His face hardened defensively. "You have no proof." "Oh, I have proof," Mira said. She lifted a thick folder from the podium beside her. "I have records of every stolen dollar, every forged signature, every illegal transfer, every lie you fed into this building." Murmurs broke out among the employees. Whitaker took a shaky step back. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Mira's voice cut through the room like a blade. You stole from this company, you betrayed your position, and you tried to silence me permanently." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Employees turned to look at Whitaker with disgust, shock, or fear. "Arrest him," Mira said simply. The officers stepped forward, reading him his rights as they snapped handcuffs around his wrists. Whitaker tried to twist out of their grip, red-faced and furious. "You ruined everything," he shouted at Mira. "This was supposed to be my company. You didn't deserve it." Mira held her ground, her voice strong. "I didn't earn this company in the way you think, but I earned my father's trust, and you lost yours." Tears of frustration blurred Whitaker's eyes as he was dragged out of the building. See. The doors slammed behind him. A long, stunned silence followed. Then every employee in the lobby turned back to Mira. Some were ashamed, some were impressed, some were speechless, but all of them were listening. Mira stepped down the staircase slowly, her heart pounding, the weight of the moment pressed against her chest. Bryce stood at the bottom, still processing everything. When she reached him, he spoke first. "You're Mira Harlow," he whispered. "The Mira Harlow." Mira felt her throat tighten. "Yes. You're the CEO?" "Yes." Mira's breath caught. "Bryce," she whispered, "I need to talk to you privately." He nodded once quietly and followed her into a small executive meeting room just off the lobby. The door shut softly behind them. Inside, the room felt too still, too quiet, too big. Mira's chest tightened. She hated silence when it came right after secrets. It made every truth feel louder. Bryce stood in front of her, hands in his pockets, eyes gentle but deeply wounded. "You're really Mira Harlow," he said softly. More to himself than to her. "The Mira Harlow I've seen on posters and newspaper clips." She swallowed hard. "Yes, and the entire time we've been talking, hanging out, getting close. You were pretending to be someone else." Mira's eyes stung. "I wasn't pretending to be someone else," she whispered. "I was pretending to be someone less." He blinked, his expression tightening. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "Bryce, everything you saw in me, that was real. The way I laughed, the way I looked at you, the way I felt when you were kind to me, none of that was fake." He didn't respond. His silence hurt more than anger would have. She took a shaky breath. "I didn't tell you because I was scared. I came here carrying grief I didn't know how to handle. My dad left me an entire company, and I felt too small for it, too lost. I didn't want people to see my fear. I didn't want people to think I only got this job because of my name." Her voice cracked. "So I hid." Bryce's jaw clenched slightly. "From everyone?" "No, from myself." She blinked away tears. "But then you came along and suddenly hiding felt wrong." He looked down, his shoulders relaxing a little. "I just wish you trusted me." Mira shook her head quickly. "I did trust you more than anyone. You were the only person here who didn't treat me like I was invisible or unworthy. You were the one good thing I found in this whole building." He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling a long, shaky breath. I want to understand. Did you ever plan to tell me?" "Yes," she whispered. "I just didn't think it would happen after being kidnapped in the middle of the night by a man who thought I was stealing his job." Bryce's face softened instantly, worry replacing hurt. "Don't even say that. I thought I lost you, Mira. When I saw your things on the floor, when the police said you weren't in the building, my heart nearly stopped." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I know. I saw your face when you found me. I've never felt that kind of relief in my life." He took one small step toward her, closing a tiny part of the distance. "I'd do it all over again, every second. I'd search the whole world if I had to." Mira wiped her face with the back of her hand, laughing weakly. "That means a lot, more than you know." A quiet moment passed between them, a fragile, important moment where something broken slowly began to stitch itself back together. Bryce finally spoke. "So, what happens now?" Mira's breath wavered. "I hope we can start again as myself this time. No secrets, no disguises, just Mira." Bryce studied her, really studied her the same way he had done the day they met in the elevator. Except now he saw beyond the uniform, beyond the title. He saw the real her, the scared girl who lost her dad, the brave girl who walked into danger for the sake of truth, the strong girl who carried more weight than anyone realized. Finally, he nodded. "I want that," he said gently, "but I need you to promise something." She looked up. "Anything." "No more disappearing," he said. "No more putting yourself in danger without telling anyone. If you're going to face problems, you don't have to do it alone." Mira's chest warmed painfully. "Bryce, I don't want to be alone anymore. Not with this. Not with anything. He let out a small breath and stepped forward slowly, giving her time to pull back. She didn't. He wrapped his arms around her and pulled her into his chest. This time, the hug felt different. Not desperate like the one in the woods, not shocked like the one in the lobby. This one felt grounding, soothing, steady, like a promise. She melted into him, her forehead resting against his shoulder. His hands moved gently along her back, as if trying to wipe away the last traces of fear she carried. "I'm so sorry," she whispered again, voice breaking. "I know," he murmured, "and I forgive you." Mira closed her eyes, tears slipping free, not from sadness but from sheer relief. When they finally pulled apart, Bryce cupped her cheeks gently. "Next time you need me," he said, "just ask. You don't have to carry everything alone." Her lips trembled into a small smile. "I won't." He leaned forward and kissed her softly, slower and deeper than before. Not a kiss of shock, a kiss of healing. It was warm, real, full of forgiveness. When they parted, Bryce rested his forehead against hers. "So," he said quietly, "should we go back out there? People definitely want answers." Mira groaned softly. "They really do." Bryce chuckled. "You'll be okay. You were meant for this." She took a slow breath, letting his words settle inside her like a steadying anchor. "Will you stay?" she whispered. "Always," he said simply. And with that, they walked out together, Mira with her head a little higher, Bryce with his hand lightly brushing against hers. The lobby fell silent as they stepped out, but this time the silence wasn't hostile. It was awe, respect, recognition. Mira no longer felt invisible. She no longer felt small. She no longer felt like she had to face everything alone. For the first time since her father's death, she felt ready. The days after the reveal felt like stepping into a new world, a world where Mira no longer felt like she had to hide behind a mop or bury herself beneath someone else's expectations. The building, once cold and filled with suspicious whispers, now felt warmer somehow, like sunlight had finally slipped into corners that had been dark for too long. It wasn't perfect. Nothing healed overnight. But things were changing. Employees who once brushed past her now looked her in the eye. Some apologized quietly for how they had treated the janitor girl. Others spoke to her with a respect she had never imagined receiving in this building. But Mira didn't crave the attention. She wanted the honesty, the sincerity, the same things her father valued. She made changes immediately, changes that shocked some but inspired others. New transparency rules, stricter auditing protocols, better treatment for lower-level staff, open communication with every department. It was a lot. It was overwhelming. And some days she cried in her office when no one was there. But she kept going because now she wasn't doing it alone. Bryce was always nearby, sometimes helping her carry documents, sometimes reminding her to eat lunch, and sometimes simply sitting with her in silence when the weight of leadership felt too heavy on her shoulders. He never tried to take over. He never pretended to have the answers. He was just there. And for Mira, that kind of presence felt like a safety net she never had before. Weeks turned into months. The company slowly regained its footing. Employees who once worked in fear now worked with renewed confidence. The atmosphere shifted from tense to hopeful. On one sunny afternoon, Mira stood in her father's old office, now hers, staring at a framed picture she had placed on the shelf. A photo of her and her dad at her high school graduation, his arm around her shoulders, her head leaning against him, both smiling like the world belonged to them. Bryce stepped into the office quietly. "You okay?" Mira nodded. "Yeah, just thinking about him." Bryce walked to stand beside her, looking at the photo too. "He'd be proud of you." Mira smiled softly, her throat tightening. "I really hope so." "He would," Bryce said gently. "You saved his company. You gave it back its heart." She blinked quickly, fighting tears. "Some days, I still feel like that janitor with dirt on her face." Bryce nudged her lightly. "That girl saved more than floors. She saved everything." Mira laughed, a real warm laugh that softened the sadness clinging to her. "Come on," Bryce said, brushing his fingers against hers. "You've got a board meeting in 20 minutes. "I know," she groaned. "Remind me why I ever agreed to be a CEO again." Bryce grinned. "Because you're amazing at it." She rolled her eyes playfully. "Flattery won't get you out of proofreading my speech." He held up his hands. "Fine, fine, but you owe me dinner." "You wish." Their light teasing had become a quiet thread of comfort woven through every long day. And slowly, a future began building itself around them, even if neither of them said it out loud yet. It was after the arrest when Bryce asked her to go with him somewhere after work. "Wear something warm," he said with a mysterious smile. Mira raised an eyebrow. "Should I be nervous?" "Definitely," he teased, but in a good way. He took her hand as they walked out of the building, something he had started doing naturally, without hesitation, without needing to ask. Mira's heart fluttered every time. He led her to the rooftop of Harlow Industries, the same rooftop she once sat on alone, crying into the wind, unsure if she could handle the life unfolding in front of her. But tonight was different. Tiny fairy lights were wrapped around the railing. "Why?" Softly in the twilight. A small table was set up near the edge with a candle flickering in the center and soft music playing through a speaker. Mira gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Bryce," she breathed. "What is all this?" He took her coat and draped it over the back of her chair before guiding her to sit. "I wanted to celebrate something." She frowned slightly. "Celebrate what?" He smiled, the same gentle, warm smile he gave her the first time he held the elevator door open. "You!" Mira's heart melted instantly. Dinner was quiet and intimate. They talked about everything and nothing. How chaotic her day was. How he had nearly fallen asleep during a meeting. How their first date had felt like two lost souls trying to find the same sky. The sky turned darker and the city lights shimmered below like scattered stars. Mira leaned back in her chair, watching the skyline she had grown to love more than she expected. "This is beautiful," she said softly. "It's missing something," Bryce replied. He stood. Mira frowned. "What do you mean?" He walked around the table, heart pounding visibly in his chest. When he stopped in front of her, he reached into his pocket. Her breath caught. His hands trembled as he slowly sank onto one knee. Mira covered her mouth again, tears instantly pooling in her eyes. Bryce looked up at her with a tenderness she could feel through her bones. "Mira Harlow," he said, voice warm and shaking at the same time. "The night I met you, I didn't know your name. I didn't know your story. I didn't know your world was falling apart." His voice cracked slightly. "But I knew I wanted to be in your life, and every day since then has only proved that you're the strongest person I know. You're smart, kind, brave, and somehow still manage to smile even when everything seems overwhelming." Mira's lips trembled as tears streamed down her face. "You don't have to be a CEO for me. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to hide." He paused, breathing shakily. "I love you, Mira, and if you'll let me, I want to love you for the rest of my life." He opened the velvet box. Inside was a delicate ring shining softly under the fairy lights. "Mira," he whispered, "will you marry me?" Mira pressed her shaking hands to her heart, overwhelmed by a flood of emotions. Every moment flashed through her mind. Every tear, every fear, every stolen kiss. Every night she thought she was alone. Every morning he showed up anyway. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, Bryce, I will." He slipped the ring onto her finger with trembling hands. Mira laughed through her tears and pulled him up. Throwing her arms around him, he hugged her tightly, burying his face in her neck. "You just made me the happiest man alive." Mira kissed him, soft, grateful, overflowing with love. The city sparkled beneath them, but nothing shone brighter than that moment. Months later, Harlow Industries shut down early for the biggest event it had ever seen, the wedding. Mira walked down the aisle in a simple, elegant gown, one her father would have loved. Bryce stood at the end, eyes wet, smiling like the world had narrowed down to just her. Their vows were soft. Their tears were real. Their love was undeniable. When they kissed as newlyweds, the crowd erupted into cheers that shook the room. Employees whispered to each other, "She deserved this. She fought so hard. She's changed everything. She's incredible." And Mira held Bryce's hand, feeling nothing but joy, pure, unfiltered joy. Her story had begun with grief, fear, and a disguise, but it ended in love, in healing, in truth. And she knew her father was somewhere smiling, proud of the woman she became. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to this channel and tell us where you are watching from.